All right, hello, my friends. Today, I decided I'm gonna take a nice little tour of my library here. As you know, I like to read a lot, so I thought maybe it would be interesting to sort of go through everything and, we'll see how it goes. I'm gonna start off with this bookshelf here, where you can see my hand here. I'm like filming with a tablet here, so it's kind of a bit difficult. But so if we start at the bottom here, and pretty much like I set it up, there's like a very like specific way that I've organized everything here, and like I'll get through that when I get through all the different shelves, so to speak. But here, this kind of like shelf I bought, I actually carried this uphill like 2 kilometers because I just needed to like stack a bunch of books that didn't really fit anywhere. And so if I start here, I got some comic books. If I pull up some stuff, I got these practical Chinese readers here. They're I never actually got through these. I got these used for like $1 or something. And I don't know, I felt like if I wanted to like practice more Chinese or Mandarin specifically, I could like go through these and like learn a little bit more. I got 2 of them. There's 2 books here. I don't know what year these are from. I think they're from like the 80s or maybe even like the 60s or something. But anyway, so yeah, pretty much here there's nothing really much interesting. I have Marvel Encyclopedia. And this is pretty cool. As a kid, I used to read this a lot. It has you can go through all like the different characters in the Marvel universe. Here we got favorite classic here, Mein Kampf. Every person should have a copy of this in their library. Although I didn't put it in the main library because the formatting pisses me off. Because Amazon sometimes makes these fucking books that it's just like the format sucks. It's like the size of a textbook. If I'm just gonna open this up here, I mean, I don't want to read this. Like it's already difficult enough that this is Mein Kampf, and I have to, sit through this, and it's like the formatting is just awful. Like it's so hard to lose your place when it's like it's so wide to read through. It's like reading through a shitty email or something. I'm gonna put this aside. I don't feel like putting everything away right now. These are some textbooks from Canadian securities course that I was taking when I was trying to apply for a bank. I ended up failing the exam like 3 times. So, you know, despite what I thought I would be good at, I definitely didn't do a good job here. And then I'd have like these random like textbooks that I read this one actually, the economics textbook. I haven't read the intermediate accounting one. These I just got like at a Salvation Army for like $1, literally $1. You can get a university level textbook. It's usually obviously a few years out of date, but when you're learning about basic accounting or economic principles, it's not like they're going to be changing much anyway. This I literally found like on top of a dumpster, like in very good condition. And it's like this teacher's edition of a humanities class. And I was like, fuck it, I'll take that. Here I got this John Lennon book, which got when I was like really young. I was actually at the Museum of Art and I couldn't really afford it. And the guy behind me like gave me a little bit of extra money so I could pay for this, which was actually pretty nice of him. Here, this is a classic of my childhood here. It's the early Spider-Man books. Has them like all first like 10 issues of Spider-Man. And this is what I grew up with here. Really nice stuff here. Really nice to go through this on a rainy day. Here we have a Garfield book. That's always good. If you get into the next section here, this is like I put like a lot of like short stories and poetry shit and just other books I didn't really like care for. Like I got used for like $1 or something. Like this is one of them. I know Tom Wolfe is supposed to be a good author, so like figured I'll keep it around. I have like a stack of books over there in the corner there that I just want to throw out because they're pretty much trash. They're pretty much just like really shitty sci-fi books that I got in like a box of random books from this bookstore that was closing down, and it was like they were pretty much all terrible, and I don't really want them anymore. What else is there? Perks of Being a Wallflower. I didn't like that book, but I have it anyway. I know a lot of people like it because it's like Catcher in the Rye, but I didn't like it. Outsiders I liked. Outsiders was a good teenager book about greasers and shit because I was really into that kind of culture back in the day. The Grifters was good. This I actually got from my ex-girlfriend, but we broke up, so I never ended up giving it to her for her birthday, so I have it now and never read it. Here's the Iliad. Biggest fucking piece of shit I've ever read. No need to comment on that. Yeah, so I have this actually. This I got used also for like $1, and this is in really good condition. Rudyard Kipling's 21 Tales. I haven't read through this yet, but this is actually like really cool book just in general. He was the one who did the Jungle Book. You know, I definitely want to take a look through that again. Ernest Hemingway, you know, he's a good author. Now here we have some more poetry books. Emily Dickinson, the Kalevala. This is actually pretty interesting. I'm not really into like folklore poetry, but this is actually like a Finnish classic of ancient folklore. And, you know, it's cool to read this kind of stuff. Someone's asking me if I like Shakespeare. Honestly, I've read it a bit when I was in high school. At that time, I was kind of pretty cynical about reading. So I can't really say I have an opinion because I never really reread any Shakespeare in my current era. I do like the stories, though. I do like the story of Romeo and Juliet. I think narratively that's really good, but I never actually like read through the book. I only know about it through, you know, when I was in school, right? Here's an interview with Martin Scorsese. It's one of the first big books I ever read, actually, because I mean, he's a huge influence on me. Definitely my favorite filmmaker of all time. And here's Andrei Tarkovsky, which is a book I recently got, which is basically him discussing his philosophy on art and film. And he's a really interesting guy. His films are really profound. They're really difficult to get through. Like, they're really slow and drawn out. City of Thieves is a good book. It's about Russians in World War II trying to survive. Basically, the whole book is that they're trying to find eggs for this diplomat's wedding. And at this time, like, everyone was starving to death. So just finding like a dozen eggs was like impossible to do. I haven't read it in a while, though. I was like 12 when I read it. It's pretty gory, though. You know, One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest. It's a classic. Charles Dickens' Hard Times. It's the only Charles Dickens book I've ever read. And it's okay. It's pretty good. Nothing really much to say. I need to read more of his stuff. What else is here? Nothing else. Some Greek shit that I got used once more. A lot of books I've gotten used like for really dirt cheap, and I just like some of them I just got for free. A lot of these books I just found like I would go to McGill Library and they would just have books lying out in a box for free for you to just take, and I would just take some books, and these are some of them here. Okay, so now we're going to go to the main show here, which is this first shelf here that I try to organize things based off category, so to speak. So at the bottom, we have history, or just general history, and, you know, social aspects, or what do you call it? Anthropology, I would say. So you have here at the beginning, like, you have Indonesia, Nazi culture. This is another used book I got, which is pretty interesting, going into like the idea of what the Nazi culture of the world run by Nazis would look like, and how those people, you know, would live their lives and what their beliefs were. It's more than just like, you know, Hitler's Mein Kampf, or just, you know, general like World War II history you might find. It goes more in depth to like the ideas you might find. This I got from a friend of mine's dad who was Jewish, and he was like, "Here, read this book about Jewish pirates." And I was like, okay, never actually read it, but you know what, one day I definitely should, because I mean, just from the title, it's pretty fucking funny. Then I got this book. Let me just get that in there. Got this book on Rastafarians, good shit. The Celts, these are all used books. This one I got for free. Early medieval history, really dry book. I mean, it's really difficult to catalog history at that point in time, because there's not much evidence of that period of time even existing. But it was an interesting read to get through, to read that part of history, which isn't really talked about much. I'm just going to try to go through these. Here we go. This is my Thomas Sowell book. This is like, I don't know, like, this is like the one that was kind of the most edgy book you could buy probably, but is actually pretty interesting. I think he's a really well thought person. I think he's really intelligent, and I think he gets lumped into a lot of like the typical, I don't know, black conservatives like Candace Owens or whatever, but I think he's actually like very intelligent, very well thought out, and I think he just gets lumped into like the typical Fox News category just because he's promoting, libertarian views. This is actually the first book on communism I ever read. Really good book just on the history of it and how it just kind of sucks in general, and viewing it from a very non-partial standpoint, being very objective about it. This is also an interesting book. It talks about the history of financial speculation world, with like the stock market, but it goes back to even like the Roman era. This book I got for free in a bin about Brazil. Have no idea what it's about, really. Politics in a patrimonial society. I have no idea what that means. McMafia. Haven't read that yet, but it's supposed to be interesting. And here we go. Have a History of Jazz. I got this because I took a jazz history class when I was still in college. I know a fair bit of jazz history, and it's definitely my favorite genre of jazz, just historically, culturally, in every way. This book, The Nile, I got used for like $1. It's really nice in terms of like, how it looks. It's an old book, but it smells like shit. Like, it's a really smelly book, and it's really hard to like actually like read because it just smells so bad. It's not pleasant at all. Here I got this book on Russian music. Then up here, history of Rome. I have some wolf books, obviously, as that's my spirit animal. Another Brazil book. This book I got for free also about the Easter Islands, or Easter Island, not Easter Islands. Sorry, about how they discovered it. It's also pretty cool. A lot of books you can just find for free. Like, people don't really realize how knowledge is just available to get, like either dirt cheap or for free, or you can go on Amazon, whatever, pay a lot of money for that if you want more specific stuff. But you can just find a lot of cool gems of literature. It's good to have. Here we have, this is like the financial section, just anything to do with like, incorporating yourself in the capitalist world, I would say, if that's a thing. So some good books here. Ayn Rand's Virtue of Selfishness. Everyone hates her. This is a really good book. I don't really care what people say about her. Really interesting perspective on selfishness and the idea of self versus ego. She equates the two, but there's definitely a difference because she acknowledges that as well. And I think the issue is usually a language issue because she's obviously Russian. English is not her first language, and I think that's an aspect that gets mistranslated or misunderstood when in her writing specifically, especially in her works of fiction, which are, they are propaganda, but whatever. You Can Negotiate Anything. Herb Cohen, Nice Jewish Salesman. Really good book in terms of learning how to negotiate with other people, especially if you're in sales at all or anything in that kind of region of work. Definitely good. Turning Pro is another really good short little book about it's just very stoic philosophical ideas that you can apply to in your everyday life. Good stuff. Newmarket Wizards. This is also really good. Interviews with some of the best stock traders in the world. I have another one here. This is the original one I haven't read yet. I bought the newer one thinking they were the same thing, but they're actually like completely different books. But yeah, this is a really good book. It really like inspires you, and it gives you a different perspective on the financial system and financial markets in general, which I think people misunderstand a lot. Intelligent Investor, this is a staple in investing theory. I got through this. Basically, you know, the bottom line of this book is don't buy hype, buy companies that actually make money. That's really all it is. You don't really need a 600-page book to explain it, but it definitely drills that idea into your head. What else can I look here? This book's kind of boring, but it gives you some cool tips about like stock market cycles. I didn't really like apply many of it. It wasn't really interesting to me. Here we go. We got George Soros, Alchemy of Finance. This is a pretty advanced book, so I haven't read it yet. I want to become more literate before I actually get through this. You can hate George Soros all you want. He's a fucking genius. He knows his shit. Like, you can't really hate that guy. Charting and Technical Analysis. This is a good book. So like these two books are literally the exact same thing. The only difference is, out of my ignorance and stupidity, this one was $20. This one was like $65. So take it as you will. If you want to learn technical analysis, just get this book by Fred McAllen. It's really cheaply designed and the images are really bad quality. But when you get books like this, you realize that like the people aren't putting a lot of effort into the graphic design because they have better shit to do, like make money, and they're doing this out of their own time. Fuck, I can't put this back in. It's hard to do this with one hand. Fucking, I'm just gonna leave it here. Okay, this financial textbook, really dry, boring, but it gives you the basics of finance and the mathematics behind it and financial analysis. If you're interested in that, get this book. If you can get through a book like this, then, you're on the right path, because these are really fucking boring, these books. This book's okay. It's pretty basic information about wealth building and wealth management. Someone's asking, never read a book. Recommendations? We're actually just going to go right up here to the fiction section, which I have two fiction sections, one on each side. So I should point out, actually, like this section here, I call it the Western section of my library, and then the other bookshelf is the Eastern side. I really haven't like boiled down to a science, but pure propaganda. Oops, flip the camera. I'm gonna switch hands because my hand's getting tired. You can see my watch. So it's propaganda, but you know what? It's still a fun read, and still like gets you motivated to, have self-esteem, really. And I think that's the main point of Ayn Rand and her philosophy, is to not get lost in collectivism and, being self-serving and giving up your sense of identity for some cause you barely understand. You got Isaac Bashevis Singer. He's a good Jewish writer. Catch-22. It's a classic book. Farewell to Arms. If you haven't read a book, I'm trying to think of what a good book to start with would be. Dropping my bookmark here. I got these cute little fried shit on a stick books. So I'm trying to think of what's an easy book to start off with, because I'm in the fiction section. Moby Dick is really good. Probably my favorite book, and I just read it like a few weeks ago. I just finished it. But I wouldn't start with that if you've never read a book. Maybe read this. Bret Easton Ellis, Less Than Zero. That's a good book about a teenager in the 80s, and it's, easy to read through. Not too complicated, the language. American Psycho is really good, although it's a bit longer. It's a bit more. This book could have been a lot shorter, but it still is really good in general, about narcissism and a critique of modern capitalism. What else? Have Ulysses? Haven't read it yet, but one day I'll get through this fucking thing. We got Catcher in the Rye up there. That's always a classic. So let's get on to the biographies. So this is, like, as I said, the Western biographies. So a lot of this has to do with American biographies. I also got Genghis Khan in there. He's a good guy. Mike Tyson's autobiography is really good, really well written. I believe he wrote it with another guy. I'm not sure. I don't think he wrote it just himself. Either way, it's still like his voice, and it's just a really good book. I got here we go. Ben Carson's autobiography, Gifted Hands. I haven't read it yet, but I will. One day I'll get through that. Michael Lewis, Liar's Poker. It's a really good book about his life working at Solomon Brothers in Wall Street. Sorry, I lost. So if you want to learn about Wall Street in the 80s, this is the book to get for sure. Gomorrah, about. Yeah, my internet's really bad, so I'm going to be cutting out here a lot. So sorry about that. Yeah, so Six Families, a piece of shit book. Don't get it. It's about the Montreal Mafia, which is actually a really interesting story, but the writer's really dry, really dull. Very uninteresting. Kind of disappointed in that. What can you do? Clive Davis, really important music executive. If you're interested in the music industry, definitely get this and read about his life. Very powerful guy in the music industry, just in general. And you got Caesar here, Richard Branson. I got his biography. Say what you will about him. He's a smart dude. Pimp. Here we go. This is some hardcore shit. If you want to get really into the mindset of a pimp in the 1940s, this is definitely the book. He's actually glossary at the end for all like the different terms he uses, but yeah, he doesn't fuck around. He's a tough guy. Here's an interesting book about the foundings of Fox News from Roger Ailes. Hillbilly Elegy, good book about the misconceptions about like working class people in America, like hillbillies and trailer park people. Really good autobiography of that. Steve Jobs. I got this as a birthday gift. Here we got General Patton. He's a cool dude. All right, so now I'm getting here to this is like the main like Judeo-Christian, Islam, whatever religion. Like these are like all the main texts, or just like the main foundational principles of this part of religious study. So I got the Talmud here. I got this for my bar mitzvah. These books, they look like really lavish and expensive, but you can actually get these fairly cheap for like $35. And they're really good quality if you're interested in Jewish study or whatever. I got the first volume where I'm definitely at some point going to collect all of them because I really want to get interest into that study. But I want to become more knowledge in like Torah and Talmud before I actually get into this, because this is like the end goal, right? This is the last sort of thing you learn about. You're only supposed to be 40 years old before you start learning the Zohar. This is when I was taking Hebrew lessons back when I was a young lad. This is the Torah they gave us. It's cool to read different translations of the Bible. We forget that it's actually written in Hebrew. So many of us are used to like the King James Bible, which I have right over here. Here I have a book on Celtic spirituality. This I like to tune into and just read some chapters. It's got a lot of poetry and just like these essays from old school monks in Ireland. And this is where like modern Christianity all originates from, right? It's all from Ireland. And it's cool to read about and see things from like the source of where this religion comes. I got the study Quran. This I got like used for like $10. If you buy this new, this is like $80. So this is a sweet find because I wanted to get a Quran and I wanted to get a good one, and this is probably the best one you can get. Here I got some other agnostic texts. Not agnostic, Gnostic, I don't know, whatever. They call it the other Bible, but it's just a bunch of other texts from that period of time and 2,000 years ago or whatever. Here we got Inferno. This is a classic. This is interesting to read through. I have the other ones too of the Divine Comedy. These have got used. Got the Book of Mormon. Book of Job. So I specifically bought another copy of this because I wanted to get like a fresh translation with a lot of commentary for this. And it's definitely my favorite book in the Bible. very poetic, very well written, and this translation's very well. The translation's by Raymond P. Schneider. So check that out. I also got this selection of the Talmud. The Talmud's like massive. Like if you want to get like the full edition of the Talmud, you're basically buying 75 books like this. Okay, so for people who criticize the Talmud, they need to understand that it's not like a book that was written. It's literally the chronicles of discussion from a bunch of rabbis and students discussing everything in the Torah, and they just compiled it into a giant fucking manuscript, that entire thing, and that's 75 massive books. This is a cool little thing, some esoteric shit. Have the Apocrypha here. This is also a cool little find. And then I found this in one of the books. I just decided to tape it up there. Nice little daily prayer here. Or at the top here. So this is, I kind of see it as like if you think this is like main echelons of Western spirituality, up here is sort of like the commentary of it. It's not really rooted in the strict like principles of the religion. It's kind of like, the outskirts, so to speak. So, I have even stuff like Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, just because it's pretty spiritual in general. Acres of Diamonds, the Satanic Bible, obviously. You got to have that in there. Aleister Crowley's Book of Law, and Principia Discordia. This I got in New York while I was visiting, and this is like the original like manuscript they were handing out to people, and this is like chock full of weird, esoteric, secret stuff, and like weird. It's cool. It's hard to read, obviously, because like the text is ridiculously small, but I dig it. Here's another Job book. It's not the Book of Job. It's like this other story about some Jewish merchants that are struggling in Russia. Elie Wiesel's Night. It's cool. Here's a book about exorcists and how they discovered people possessed by demons and how they dealt with it. So this is a pretty cool book. And I got some books on Kabbalah. Just when I get into it, these are kind of like introduction books before I actually get into the Zohar. Here we go. I got some Elijah Muhammad. I have 2 Elijah Muhammad books, so I'm serious about all that Nation of Islam shit. He's an interesting guy. Despite his hatred of the Jews and of white people in general, he does have some good ideas, and I do find him interesting to read about, just as a character in general. It's fun to look into this kind of stuff. Here we have Young Moshe's Diary. So this book I just finished. It's basically an alternative to Anne Frank's diary. And he's actually born in Holland and started writing his diary around the same time she did. And this wasn't really as popular because he's like a very Orthodox religious Jew. And he basically spent, like a lot of his time writing about Israel and the nation of Israel and like a lot of spirituality concepts. So it's not really accessible to non-Jewish readers, but I think it's superior just because it's like there's a lot more spiritual fervor in there that I find interesting. Here we go, Gospel of Mary Magdalene. That's pretty cool. Sholem Ash's The Apostle, a story of Paul or Peter, I forget his name, whatever, one of those apostles that spread Christianity. I haven't read that book yet, but it's interesting. Tragedy of Islam from the man himself, about his condemning of contemporary Islam and the extremism of it, which is really important to have, especially as we need to have, religion be, not psychotic. It's good to have Muslims who are promoting, a peaceful aspect of Islam, because I do think it's actually a beautiful religion. It's just misunderstood a lot. Here we have an interesting book about an Ethiopian Jew traveling to Israel. Ethiopia went through a civil war, and a lot of its Jews were struggling to, survive, and they had to basically be exiled, and they moved all to Israel, and it's a huge operation. Interesting guy. Here I got some interesting books here. Arbitel of Magic, Strangest Secret, the Jew and Negro. Here we go. It's a study of Jewish ancestry from this guy who believed he thought the Jews were black, which is a fairly reasonable argument, I guess, considering like a Jew fro and the big nose and whatever. Here we have Carlo Ginzburg Night Battles about witches and their trials and whatnot. Here we have Prosperity Bible. This is a nice book. It's got so many books, like Napoleon Hill, just all like the different like books on wealth building and, just making money and prosperity. And it was really cheap. It was like, I don't know if they have the price here. It was like $25 for this. And there's like 20 books in here. And this is a really good steal, really good deal for if you're interested in that kind of stuff. This I got as a gift. Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. I haven't read it yet, but there's not really much else to say. This is an interesting book. It barely fits in here. Encyclopedia of Witchcraft, Demonology. Just goes through all of history and all like the different belief systems and ideologies for witchcraft and demonology. And I didn't mention it here, but I do have King James Demonology book because he wrote an actual entire book about demons and witches and what to look out for when that was all going down, all that witch hunt shit was happening. So we're going to go to the next library. Here's my poster of Dragon Ball Z. Take a look at that. And then, so this is the next one. This is, I guess, the Eastern side of things. So here, it's not really Eastern. It's just kind of like, I don't know how to divide this up really, but whatever. Bear with me. You have this wire here. That's my Nintendo Switch. My good boy there. So at the bottom here, this is pretty much anything like related to science and pseudoscience and just experiments within science itself. Like numerology. I put like my astrology stuff in there as well. I put How to Win Friends and Influence People because that's part of psychology. So that was kind of like an iffy area of how to. Really good book on numerology. I'm really lucky that I discovered this because if you just Google up like numbers and the meanings of numbers, you're gonna get a bunch of bullshit. This is like the actual book, and he put a lot of effort in like traveling abroad, learning about the art of numerology and the significance of real numbers. And yeah, he's a cool guy. I would definitely check that book out if you can. Your Brain on Porn, very important book in this current era, learning about the effects of porn on the brain. Very very bad shit. Influence, really good book. Psychology. Okay, lost connection there for a second. That Carl Sagan's Cosmos, really good book about space. And I haven't read it yet, but Psychic Discovery Behind the Iron Curtain. So basically, it's all about psychic manipulation experiments that they were doing in the Soviet Union. And these two ladies here. Sorry, my internet's shit. Psycho-Cybernetics, really good book. Self-help book. Would definitely recommend getting that. We have a chart interpretation book. Stephen Arroyo. He's definitely like a quintessential like astrology guy. I have another book of his over here. What else? Black Science. Also really cool book about ninja mind manipulation. But it goes into like a lot of different aspects. Okay, there's got to be a way because yeah, the internet's really bad. Have Dianetics over there, if you can see. That's a staple everyone should have in their library. And then book on alchemy, and it's pretty cool. It's just a very have a history of numbers here, history of diamonds. Have that Stephen book. This book I haven't read yet, but it definitely seems interesting. A book on medieval cosmology, theories of infinity, place, time, void. Had no idea. I bought this used, but it's like brand new pretty much. It's like from the 70s. And anyways, it seemed interesting. So we're going to go to the next section here. This is like just basic, I got sheet. Sorry about that. Like the point, it's like least read here. But yeah, I got some good stuff here. I finally got it through Marx's Das Kapital. It's pretty good. I can't really like hate it. It's he's got some good ideas there. Here, this is my favorite, just in terms of having it in the collection. It's like the original Mao Zedong's, little red book here. and it's just like the first like 20 pages are just portraits of himself, which I find really fucking funny. What else is in here? What else is good? It's Western philosophy. You know, there's not really much else to say. It's just a bunch of nerds arguing with each other. Now here we have fiction. So this is where I'm putting my Russian and like beat poetry and all that other weird shit. I got, you know, Orwell here, 1984, The Jungle, really good book about factory workers in the U.S. In the early 1900s. Hinton Mystery, you know, he's a classic. Herman did read Crime and Punishment, and that's a really good book. Really enjoyed that one. You know, people don't really like the translators, the Pivlier, and I'm not going to try to pronounce that. And so I have like a bunch of different translations of Dostoevsky and Russian writers in general. This one, from like going online and comparing different translations, this one seemed to be the best translation. The translator for this one, I forget his name, but seemed to be the best one. And Arcane Arian, really, really good writer. Mulgoody Days, definitely, probably one of my favorite books. It's just a collection of short stories and really wholesome, really spiritual, really simple stories. And it's just like, it just makes you feel good. And not in a cheesy, floaty kind of way, like in a really real, genuine human way of feeling connected with other people and all that crap. He's a brilliant writer. So for the person who says I never read and want to start with a book, this is definitely a book I would read because he's a really easy to read writer, and he's just good. Like, that's all. Have 12 Angry Men, the original play here. That was a cool find to get. All right, I think I'm done here. So here we have Eastern biographies here. So this is where I'm putting all the shit. You know, Mein Kampf, Stalin. I have 2 fucking Stalin books here because you know how much I love him. This is a good book on Xi Jinping. If you want to get into the mind of this guy, understand what he's all about philosophically, you know, you can read his book here, which I really like looking at. It's like, it's just so cool aesthetically with like the off-white coloring. It's just like pure propaganda. And it's just so, there's just nothing here. There's no, you know, they're not going to have a fucking like quotes from the New York Times saying anything. It's just Xi Jinping, governance in China. That's, and same thing. That's all China is right now. And if you want to learn about Xi Jinping in general, definitely get this book. It's a short read, only a few hundred pages. Tao of Wu. You know, Rizza's great. I love him. One of my, you know, biggest inspirations. Really good, easy to read book. Yeah, definitely just check this out. It's like about his life, but also a lot about his views and spirituality. And it's just a really nice read. Not much more to say than that. Have Bob Dylan's Chronicles Volume 1. Even though he never published the second one, I still have, you know, the first one. I doubt he will ever write the second one. This is I haven't read this, but I definitely want to. It's just interviews with Vietnam veterans and talking about their experience. Always interesting to read about. You know, you got Gandhi here. He's always a good guy. Duke Ellington. So this is one of the main things I have a problem with biographies, his autobiography. And it's not in print anymore. So this I got used, luckily, on Amazon. I paid a decent price for it, I think like $20. And it's in really good condition. I'm just going to leave that here. I don't want to fuck it up. But yeah, when you look up like a Duke Ellington biography or just Duke Ellington in books, you're going to get other biographies written by other people. And you're not going to find autobiographies. And part of the main reason of reading an autobiography, especially from an artist, is seeing their thought process, seeing their creative process, seeing how they viewed art in general. That's like the most valuable thing. And they put no effort into republishing autobiographies. And it's the same thing with a lot of different musicians. Luckily, they still publish Miles Davis's autobiography. But Duke Ellington is actually a really good writer. I've read like a few chapters, and he's a really good at prose and just description, and he has a very poetic way of writing. And it's a shame they don't republish this and instead promote these third-party biographies, which I personally don't like. Here's an interesting book. This is also not in print anymore. First-person interview with Vladimir Putin right as he became president in the early 2000s. So this is kind of a cool look into him before he got really ingrained into his position as president, and you can kind of see a different side to him and see how, where he originated from and how he sort of transitioned to who he was today. Got Trotsky here, Iron Mike. This is another biography of Mike Tyson, but this is focusing specifically on his training with Customato and mostly about his life. And he's a legend. Like this is an amazing book. His biography, autobiography, Mike Tyson, and this book, both really good. This one I definitely see more as like, it's almost self-help in the way where you learn about his thought process and what goes on in his mind to become such a great champion. That's pretty cool to have. Malcolm X, that's a classic one. Bruce Lee, these are his writings. And he's done like a lot of poetry and philosophical writings. And I didn't really realize that he actually majored in philosophy when he went to university. He's a really smart guy. Aside from just martial arts, he has a lot of really cool ideas to say about Taoism and whatnot. Magus of Java. This is what really got me into Chinese martial arts, just in general. This is the first book I read about, Taoist immortal, but it really goes into the ideas of, internal alchemy and energy work. And it's just a really fun book in general. I don't really trust the validity of some of the stories he's saying, but it's a fun book if you're just starting out and learning these kinds of things. It's really fun to get into and learn about. And it just gets you excited about it. Not much more to say. Here we go. Journals of Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris. You know what this is about. Not much more to say about that. Lenin here. My uncle actually gave me these biographies here. I don't know why, but he sent me the Lenin one, the Trotsky one, and the Stalin one. For what reasons, I'm not sure, but, fuck it. I appreciate it, and I'll definitely read these because he's definitely not a communist. But speaking of him, this is actually a biography that I got, which is about my uncle's father, who is a French Canadian, who I'm not really sure the exact story, but he basically faced a lot of, discrimination because he was French and working in the government, and was basically about his life and how he fought for his principles in office. And it's interesting to see this in my family. Here's a cool book, History of Music. It's from like the 30s. It's just about like famous composers like Beethoven and Mozart and all of them. Just gives them a quick biography, just a cool book to go through all the main composers if you don't really know much about that. This is kind of a dry biography of George Gershwin. He's another favorite of mine in jazz and music in general. It's decent. Not much more to say. But in terms of a biography, it's not really that in depth, I would say, in terms of his personality and his views on the world, which is more of what I'm interested in, which is why I bought like a book like this. Okay, so now we have come to the central aspects of like Eastern philosophy and religion. So all the central texts are right here, just like on the other side there where I have like the Jewish and Christian shit. This is where you have like, Taoism, Buddhism, and Hinduism. So if I start here, this is an interesting book about like different cults and, Taoist rituals. This I got actually from my good friend, shout out to Werewolf Hair. His grandpa wrote a book on this specific text in Buddhism, and he translated it and translated two different versions, the Sanskrit and the Chinese versions. And you know what? I just said, fuck it. I'm gonna support my friend's family. I don't know who's getting this money when I bought the book, but either way, I have this book. Gateless Barrier. Here we go. This is the Mumonkan. Really good book. If you want to get into Zen and learn about Zen, understanding it from, the real way and not just from the new ager bullshit way of learning about Zen, this is definitely the book to get into it. I have a lot of copies of Tao Te Ching. a lot of copies. There's so many different translations, and because it's such a nuanced, subtle text, and there's a lot of open-ending meanings to a lot of the words, it's important to read different translations of this, because there's so many different interpretations you can read, and every single one I've read is like so vastly different than the other one. So if you want a real understanding of it, you can either learn ancient Chinese or you can get a bunch of translations. This is also a good book. This is the 4 basic Chinese books of, Chuang-Tzu, Analects from Confucius, Magus, and Tao Te Ching as well. The translation of Tao Te Ching is not my favorite, but, it's in there anyway. Here we go, Master Zhuo Xu. I got this book because after reading the Mumen Khan over here, there's a Zen master called Zhuo Xu, which he has a lot of cool little paragraphs in here. And I wanted to get another book of his that's just purely his sayings, because he was my favorite monk in the entire book. And because there's some monks in here that are fucked up. Like, they're just like, one of them just kills a cat for no reason. And like, that's supposed to be profound and deep. And it's like, okay, bro, like, you don't need to do that. Here we go. We have a book on Chinese philosophy, source book. It's just got everything you want to know about Chinese philosophy is in here. And just gives you all the basics of it. And just the basic history. It's like the equivalent to Bertrand Russell's History of Western Philosophy. This is basically the exact same thing. So if you're like, just want to get an overview of all different thoughts in China, this is the book to get. There's actually a cool picture of Bruce Lee, like in a library, reading this exact book. And it's just cool to see. Here we go. We got this book here about internal alchemy, from this guy Fabrizio Fregadio. He translates a lot of ancient texts, especially with internal alchemy, and really valuable book to have. Here we got Lao Tzu, another copy of Tao Te Ching, whatever. Here we got the I Ching. This is also a classic one on Chinese divination, but it also gives you the structural principles of Chinese philosophy and Chinese alchemy in general, of just the different combinations of yin and yang in the hexagram. I've talked about this in my cube video, so if you want to check that out, I talk about that more in depth. Here we got the Diamond Sutras, and these are all chock full of commentary and different types of things. The Platform Sutra, this is a really good one, about the Buddhist monk Huineng, who was kind of different from the typical Buddha, who usually was born into wealth. Most Buddhas were born into like and were princes. Huineng went to a monastery and wasn't seen, actually very enlightened, and became the 6th patriarch of Buddhism at that time. Here we go, the classic Dragon Ball, first edition. This is from like the year 2000. It still has like ads for like Pokemon in here, and it's like, see, here you go, Pokemon the movie. So this is a cool find to find. Like, I got this for like $5 at a used bookstore. And definitely putting it into the main echelons, because when you see my Dragon Ball documentary, you're gonna see that Dragon Ball is not just a little kid's book comic. It's really a representation of all of Chinese culture in a way that's digestible in a real format. Here we got the Upanishads. This is the basic fundamental text of Hinduism. Mainly the Rig Veda is, but I'm not really much of a fan of this per se. I like the Upanishads. The Dhammapada is a basic book. This is kind of this is like the link between Hinduism and Buddhism, pretty much. This is where it all originated from. So, not many people realize that Buddhism is actually Indian, and this is where it starts from. Even when I was in China and I went to a Buddhist temple and I was with other Chinese people, I brought up that Buddhism was Indian, and they were like, no, it's Chinese, no way. And I'm like, I'm not going to argue with that. I was just like, okay. And then here we got the Bhagavad Gita. What was a classic? Here we have another Fabrizio Pregadio. This is also a good book on internal alchemy. Just it's pretty advanced stuff. So if you're like new to that kind of thing, I wouldn't recommend starting off with stuff like this, because you're just going to get through it and nothing's going to make sense to you. Because a lot of these books were written esoterically, like they were made to be secret, so you didn't really understand it. So there's a lot of like coded language and lingo that they used back in the day to sort of hide their information. And they use like, they would equate to like yang energy as lead, or no, yin energy as lead, and yang energy as mercury. It's just weird. It's weird language, and it's hard to get into unless you have like more of a foundational knowledge in this kind of stuff. This is a cool book, Secret Oral Teachings in Tibetan Buddhist Sects. You know, when you go to these like Buddhist retreats and they teach you like stuff about compassion and love, you know, that's what they teach to like simpletons, basically, because the real knowledge and the real wisdom is only reserved for people who have done the work and have done the work spiritually to deserve that kind of lessons. And these are kind of the lessons here. And it's a trippy book to get into. I read this while I was on a plane, and when you're on such high elevation, especially when it's a night flight, and like everything's dark and quiet, and you're just in the middle of the sky and it's really dark, it's a really weird book to get into. But it's a good book. You know, got some Thich Nhat Hanh, you know, basic, you know, he's kind of an Oprah Winfrey Buddhist type of person, but he's got a really lot of good things to say in general. Tibetan Book of the Dead. This is a cool, interesting book if you want a different perspective on the afterlife. Definitely gave me different perspectives on it. Can't really say I agree with everything in it, but you know, we're dealing with beliefs here, but it's still interesting to read about, and I think it's important. I mean, it's just like a cool book to have in general too, right? Here we have Arcane Arian again. I put this up here because this is like a story of like a real traditional Hindu god folk narrative that he, you know, recontextualized into a novel. And, you know, he's just a brilliant writer. So I put it up here because it's, you know, traditional. And then what else? This is the first Buddhist book I read. Just general Buddhist scriptures. You know, just kind of it's a good starting block because it just gives you basic scriptures and gives you basic ideas and principles and a history of it that, you know, you can learn about pretty easily. Heart Sutra, that was also a good one from Red Pine. He has a lot of good translations of stuff. Like he did the Platform Sutra and the Diamond Sutra and this Tao Te Ching here too. So he has a lot of good translations and has a lot of good commentary. Haven't read this. I got this used for like 25 cents. I don't know what to expect from it. This seems cool. It's about some yogi, and he just writes his thoughts on karma. And, you know, it's good spiritual shit. There's not really much else to say. So then here's the final section here, which is commentary on like, you know, the principles of Eastern religion or whatever. And, you know, it's got some cool stuff here. This is where I put like most of my martial arts books here. Like I have a Tai Chi book and a Qigong book from Yang Jung-Ming. He's got a lot of good books, a lot of good resources. He's kind of like the pinnacle of bringing, you know, this kind of internal work to the West. And, you know, he's a doctor, right? So he's legit. So, and there's a lot of bullshit artists like this one. I read this book. It's kind of bullshit. Dr. Ji Gang Sha. It's just kind of new age crap. There's some good elements there, but it's shrouded with a lot of, you know, hokey new age stuff because they're really trying to market this stuff for normal people who don't really have time to dedicate themselves to these arts in a real profound way. It's just kind of like, oh, like I'm going to learn how to meditate 15 minutes a day and like make my life a little easier. You know, I respect it, but it's not really the best source material you want to get if you want to really get into this kind of stuff. This is also a really good book for Neigong. Damo Mitchell, he's a really great teacher on this stuff, really legit. These two guys, Yang Jung-Ming and Damo Mitchell, are probably the best sources that I know of personally to get into this stuff, as well as Fabrizio Pregadio, who translates this stuff. But this is more for like reference, I would say, because it's difficult to read through this stuff because it's coded in weird language. These two guys actually traveled and studied with masters and learned the shit that they know today. What else do we got here? You know, I got another Tai Chi book here. I haven't read this. This I got used for like $1. Seemed cool, like this 1970s aesthetic here. I don't know why there's a building there, but it's pretty cool anyway. Here's another guy that's actually cool. Scott Meredith. He self-publishes a lot of his books on Amazon. He's got a shit ton of books. Not really my kind of interests. He talks a lot about like cultivating energy through movements, where I'm more focused on internal practices with meditation. But he's still a good reference. Tao of Physics. So this is like this guy wrote like parallels between modern scientific physics and Eastern mysticism and finding all the links between that, because there is a lot of links with traditional Chinese Taoism and current science, because that's really what Taoism is. It's not a religion so much as it's a science. It's a way of understanding the inner workings of the human body and of nature in general. This one's about sleeping. I haven't read it yet, but it seems pretty intense. Carl Jung, book on Feng Shui. This is a good reference I use sometimes when, organizing my house. Siddhartha Hermann Hesse. This is a classic. This is definitely a staple in terms of like learning about Eastern mysticism and Buddhism, especially from a Western perspective. If you're not really familiar with it, this is also a really good book to start off with that kind of thought. This is a good book, Miracle of Mindfulness by Thich Nhat Hanh. Again, like pretty Oprah Winfrey kind of stuff, but really good foundational principles of meditation and, mindfulness in general, which I think is very valuable to have. These are some good books. These are both exactly the same, pretty much. So I wouldn't get both of them. Pick one of these and you'll get the basics of the importance of them. But really good aspects of dealing with the mind and with mental strength and resolve. Really good stuff. Again, this is kind of more like Oprah Winfrey stuff again, but it's cool to read anyway. These are cool books. These are really old. Hatha Yoga and the Science of Breath here. So they're all written by the same guy. And they just give you a lot of like different health techniques and things you can learn about, especially related to breathing. A lot of breathing exercises, which I still use, and they're very helpful, especially if you want to like clean out your lungs or clean out your body in general. There's a lot of cool tips in there. This is a cool little book, 365 Tao, just like a bunch of different poems, meditative poems you can read about. I did shrooms once and just went to the park and was like just like browsing through this book, and it's cool to read in that kind of context of just opening up a random page and reading it, and you can learn a lot. Here we go, a book on acupuncture, pretty basic stuff. Power of Alpha Thinking. Ho'oponopono. Here we go, the Hawaiian forgiveness secrets. And finally, I'll close this off here with the Hagakure, which is the pocketbook given to samurais, and just a lot of cool principles of stoicism and being subservient basically to the king. But there's also a lot of interesting stuff here. If you've seen the movie Ghost Dog, this is the book he's like worships pretty much and lives his life by. It's a cool book to have in general. So that was my library. Thanks for tuning in. And I just felt like doing this because why not here? And I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.